Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Building Your Career in Canada, Chinese and Canadian Perspectives. My name is Marie Gervais, and I'm going to be working with my esteemed colleague, Ada Tai, today. And we are going to present to you something that will be very useful if you're an employee, an employer, a job seeker, if you're Chinese, Canadian, or if you're new to Canada. So that covers quite a few different people. This is Ada. She has an MBA and is also a designated HR professional. And she has been working for almost 10 years in the field with a number of companies and now recently started her own HR consulting practice. So she helps people to integrate their human resources into their daily operations to get some customized training so that they can align their business objectives with their daily operations. And she also provides other human resources services to organizations on a contract basis. Because she is an immigrant to Canada herself, Ada knows exactly what it's like, what it feels like, and how difficult it is to start up in a new country. And that's why her insights will be very invaluable today.
Good morning, everybody. It's my honor to be partnering up with Marie Gervais on doing this webinar, and it's my honor to introduce her. Marie is a dear colleague, mentor, a friend to me, and so she's currently the CEO of Shift Management. Marie has a PhD in culture diversity and learning. In the last 20 years, she has spent lots of time in training diverse managers in multiple industries. She also taught at university level, and she is an expert in creating e-learning curriculums. And because of her passion, her company also focuses on helping newcomers to settle down in Canadian society and achieve their career goals.
Thank you, Ada. What we're going to cover today is three things throughout the presentation, not necessarily in this specific order, although we have that order going throughout the webinar, but we also integrate the three themes throughout the webinar. The first one is giving insights into how Chinese job seekers see employers and also how Canadian employers see Chinese job seekers. And then strategies for negotiating your career, because these are very, very difficult times and it's a volatile economy, and we need to know how we can negotiate our careers when things are always up in the air and there is no real job security. And the third thing we're going to do is to give you some ideas for building your career over the long term. So we hope you will be able to type some things into the chat box as we go along. And in a few words, what do you think is the most difficult barrier for immigrants to find work in Canada? And while you're thinking about that, maybe Ada, you have a couple that you want to add, and then I'll add a couple too.
That sounds great. So to me, learning English and getting adapted to the Canadian culture are the most difficult to me. And it's still a lifelong journey for me. That's something I'm still improving on every day.
Mm-hmm. And what I find also is that's a difficulty for many newcomers when they're looking for work in Canada is they think that finding work in this country will be the same or similar to how they found work in their country or how they thought people found work in their country. And it can be really a shock to discover that it's quite different, that every country has its own protocol for how to find work. And if you're not using that protocol, it can be very frustrating. So we have a few people typing into the chat box, and a couple of people said the language. So of course, the language is something that comes up quite regularly. A couple more people said getting used to the cultural differences, and one person said understanding people's sense of humor. So those are all things that people face. And Ada's going to tell us a little bit about what her story is like, so that you can see how she has progressed along her career timeline.
That sounds great. I came to Canada in 2003, so time has been going really fast. It's been 14 years. I came as an international student. I studied at the University of Alberta. My undergraduate degree was a Bachelor of Arts degree, and heavily focused on using the language, so speaking, listening, group work, presenting, reading, writing, you name it. It was very difficult when I first came here to take the program. I realized that in my second semester, there was a philosophy class. I just could not understand what the professor was saying in the class, and when I was reading the textbook, it just drove me crazy. I still remember that one chapter took me 13 times to read through the chapters and almost translating every single word in order to get an essence of what the context is about. It was difficult, and as you can imagine, my poor mark at the end of the first year. I'm a go-getter, so I wasn't satisfied with the poor results after first year. I thought, okay, I'm going to set some goals for myself. So by the time I graduate from the university, I want to have a good GPA. I want to be able to communicate very fluently with colleagues and friends and classmates in English. So I took the extra step. I joined a writing club at the university. So the writing club gathered us together every week, and the teacher would ask us to submit one writing. I would always give extra. I would always submit 2 or 3 writings for the teachers to correct me. And I would also make lots of friends in the class, Canadian friends, ask them to correct my English while I teach them how to say a few words in Chinese. And also was reading the news, watching TV and watching the news on computer, really listening to the words that Canadians use and observe how they talk. Also, I hired a home tutor who can help me with improving my grammar as well. And then I got really curious about working as a human resources professional. So as you may know, that working in HR is really it's a lot about learning the language and adapting to the culture, especially when it comes to speaking the legal terms, managing issues in the workplace, and coaching managers and employees. So it's really about knowing the culture. It's really about expressing yourself and listening to others. So that's another stretch goal for myself, is I wanted to become a well-known, respected human resources professional. And I know there are still ways for me to improve, but that's also always a goal that I'm striving to work hard on. And every day in my work same thing, I observe, I listen, I join discussions, and I really observe how others behave in the workplace. That's a nuances for me to learn about Canadian workplace culture as well.
So
Back to you, Marie.
Ada, that's something that you and I have both in common, because when I was learning French, my parents were immigrants and they did not speak French because that wasn't the country that they came from. And when I was learning French, I did the same thing. I went to a country, and I went to France, and I stayed there for a few months in immersion. And when I came back, I was taking my courses in French, and I had a very hard time keeping up my marks, because same thing. I had to read things over and over and over again. I never understood them. Everything seemed so difficult. But after lots of really targeted work on the language, I became fluent enough that I've been working most of my adult life in French. So Ada and I did the same thing. And we had a very specific strategy with making friends with people and going out of our way to find ways to practice the language so that we could master it. Right, Ada?
That sounds great.
So I'm going to give a few thoughts on the differences between the goals of somebody who is an immigrant looking for a job, and then the goals of the employers who are looking to hire somebody. So an immigrant, generally speaking, is looking for a job and wants to be hired because they're technically qualified, and they figure that if you tell them what to do, they'll be able to learn it, and they need a job, and they figure their English can be improved as they go along, which is true, because things do improve as you go along. The employers have a completely different agenda. So they think, well, if we hire you, will we understand each other? So for them, English is not the bottom of the list, it's the top of the list. And then they wonder if cultural differences will interfere with fit in the company. And that's something that a lot of times that newcomers aren't thinking about, but it's very top in the minds of many employers. They also wonder if clients will be confused because of cultural and language differences and cause the company to lose money. So as you can see, they have different goals, but there is a way that both can meet halfway. So the job seeker wants to make money and have the technical qualifications recognized, be shown what to do so they can learn, and learn English as they go. So one approach that you can try as a job seeker is to smile. Now the smiling, I know this sounds like it's not very important, but actually smiling is really important. And I was just the other day at a job fair event, and people came up to me and asked if they could have their picture taken with me, because most of the people that were at the event were newcomers looking for jobs. And so I then I also got pictures, and when I looked at them, I was the only person smiling. And a couple of them showed me their LinkedIn profiles, and their LinkedIn profiles, they were also not smiling. And I have had at least 5 employers tell me, that when they looked up people's profiles on LinkedIn and they weren't smiling, they dismissed them. So that means they didn't even look at their resumes because of their photo. Even though you're not supposed to have a photo on your resume, people look on LinkedIn to see where you are and who you are and what you're doing online. And if you're not smiling, it's already a strike against you. So the smile is important. Then be friendly and figure out how you can ask some kind of a variation of this question. How can I help your company solve this problem? And part of that is to research ahead of time about the company and see what might be a problem that you could solve. And I have a very specific example of how this worked for me. I employed a marketing manager from Colombia, and her English wasn't perfect. Her skills were fantastic. She had a really good background from her company. When she came for the interview, she already had done an analysis of my website and gave me 3 things that needed to be fixed so that I would get better traction on the website. And I was very impressed because I didn't ask her to do that, but she took it upon herself to do that. And I actually hired her because she was the only candidate that I interviewed who came with a solution before I even had asked her about the problem. So that's something you can do that helps to meet halfway with the employer. If you're an employer, your goals are you want to make money for your company and you don't want any stress or problems, so you want a good fit for the workplace, and you're looking for somebody who can take charge and solve problems, which is difficult for newcomers to do because they don't come from the same cultural background. And anyone that starts a new job, even if they're in the same city or the same town, they aren't going to be able to take charge and solve problems right away, even though employers want that, because they have to learn the job and the company culture. So, and the employer also wants people to be able to communicate well in English now, both written and oral. So what you can do if you're an employer is to also smile, because people stop smiling when they're faced with somebody who seems quite different from them. And stay friendly so that the newcomer who is there for the interview isn't going to feel really excluded and unwelcome. And then make it easy for them to answer the question. Say, here's a problem that my company has. How could you help me solve that problem? So then you're both going to be on the same page with helping the company to solve a problem, and that's going to bring you together. Now, the preparation for employment for the job seeker is you need really to practice your spoken and written English. Ada has emphasized that quite a bit, and same with me, because people just feel uncomfortable if they're not sure about your English. And to do that, you can spend time with Canadians to be comfortable with the culture, which sounds like it's easy, but as we all know, it's not. Because it's not like every Canadian you meet is going to just want to sit down and spend time helping you practice your English. So you have to look for opportunities and people who want to speak with you. And I know, and Ada knows as well, that although it's not easy, it can be done, and you do meet people like that. In fact, I think Ada was so good at looking for people to speak English with that she ended up marrying somebody who was outside of her culture.
That's true. It's a strategy as well if you want to try it.
Yeah, that could be a marriage partner strategy. So looking for possible problems that employers have and thinking about how you can solve them is very, very important. And then another thing that people have found really helpful is to make a list of why the employer might not hire you. Like, be really honest, like, why would the employer not hire me? Well, it could be because of your accent. It could be because you don't have experience in Canada. So then prove the employer wrong by finding an answer to those problems. So if you have an accent, present yourself and say, oh, you've probably noticed my accent from whatever country, but it has never gotten in the way of me doing a really great job. And then talk about something that you do well. And so that way the employer moves right away from the accent, and by the end of their time with you will already be thinking, I'd love to have somebody who has such a lovely accent. So they're going to move away from being fearful to focusing on your competencies instead. So now on the employer's perspective, think of places where you can find talent where you have not been looking. And a lot of employers have not considered partnering with an immigrant serving organization. And there are a lot of really capable people, very many capable people, especially in Canada, who opposed to other countries, because Canada has a point system for immigration. And almost every immigrant that comes here, unless they're refugees, has to have a professional background with a whole lot of points. So there's a lot of unused talent out there. And if you get in touch with a local immigrant serving organization and tell them what kinds of jobs you're looking for, they're going to find some very capable people for you. And it's going to be a lot less trouble for you and less expensive. Also look to get a diversity of people involved with the hiring process, because if you have different people, different ages, different cultural groups involved in some aspect of the hiring process, you're going to understand fit differently because they all have a different idea of what makes fit. So you'll probably be more equitable in your hiring if you do that. Think about ways that people from other countries could provide input to help you solve problems you currently have. So my employee from Colombia was very good at helping me see things from a perspective that it never occurred to me before, because of course I come to it from a Canadian perspective, and she came to it from a Colombian perspective. So she could approach marketing problems in ways I had never even thought of before, and it was very useful. Finally, list the personal qualities you need for each job. So be specific about if you need a detail-oriented person, if you need a client-facing person, if you need somebody who has a particular set of qualities that allows them to do that job with excellence. Make sure you list it in the job description. So over to you, Ada.
Yes, thank you. So I do have a few tips. Now I'm putting on my human resources hat on, and I do have a few tips for Canadian employers. As you can know, as you can imagine, that as newcomers or any people put on the stage to being interviewed, that we get really sensitive and we get really nervous when we are being interviewed. And with that being said, if the employers can just smile a little bit more to us and have a firm, warm handshake, that will make us feel a lot more at ease. Especially if English is not our first language, then we are nervous and then we don't express ourselves as good as we can be. And the other thing is that once employers hire newcomers into the workplace, they often feel that, how come these newcomers are so quiet? They don't care about what we do? It's actually the opposite. They don't want to say the wrong thing to look dumb, and they're afraid to be judged, so they'd rather just keep quiet. So a tip to Canadian employers is that if you can include these newcomers into your discussions, ask them to solicit their feedback, then eventually as time goes by, they will become more engaged, they become more productive, and they feel more comfortable being part of your team. And I also suggest of using a buddy system. By that, I mean you can pair up somebody who is more senior at the workplace with your relatively newer newcomer into the workplace. In that situation, the newcomer will feel, I feel comfortable, I have someone to ask questions to, I'm not lonely, then I feel more engaged in the workplace. Last but not least, safety communication is always critical. I once worked for an organization where we had employees from more than 20 countries represented. And as you can imagine, the cultural differences, the language differences, many people's language, English language is not the best. So what we did at the company is we used pictures as much as we can on our posters, signages, and we even had our safety training with internal employees as interpreters for their language groups and did demonstrations. And that worked really well.
Very smart idea. I wish that all employers would do that. Even just having a sentence up saying welcome in different languages is a really great way to get people feeling more comfortable. But then taking it that next step further and ensuring that the safety communications are in multiple languages can be very, very helpful.
And also, the reason that Maria and I suggest to better incorporate newcomers into the workplace is not just because it's best practice. It is the way going to be. From this chart, you can see that in the last 30 years, visible minority new immigrants coming to Canada has represented, so the number of visible minorities coming to Canada have quadrupled in the last 30 years. A survey I read yesterday is that by 2030s, in Canada, that immigration will be the sole source of population growth. And in metropolitans such as Vancouver and Toronto, that's going to be, you're going to see a lot of visible minorities working in the workplace. So it's not just best practice, it's the way it's going to be. Why not start it early?
Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because Canadians have not been having children for many, many years, or they either don't have children or they have 1 or 2 children, and so therefore they're not replacing the workforce quickly enough. And even if they started now, they're still 30 years behind. So immigration is the only the only way we're going to be able to fulfill positions. So we need to learn to work more effectively together. Here are a few recommendations for Chinese job seekers that I think are helpful. They're actually helpful for anybody who is new to the country. So first off, spend time volunteering in an organization where you're not with other people who speak the same language as you. I have several Chinese friends who do a lot of volunteer work. It's really important work, and they do a lot of things to help other people. And it looks very good on their resume. The only problem is it's all in Chinese, so they're not getting a chance to practice English, which is, as you heard from Ada, is really important. And another way that you can improve your English is to listen to CBC Radio. CBC Radio, the announcers speak more slowly, and they provide a lot of insights, cultural insights about the country. And they also have a lot of their programs as podcasts, so they're free podcasts that you can listen to. And they have an English language practice different for each city, where they have somebody who takes the text from monthly stories and newscasts, and they put them into plain English and make sure that they're available in video and audio, and that they're downloads so people can practice their English with them. And it's really helpful for understanding the Canadian language and culture and preoccupations of different groups of Canadians in different places. And I can't stress how important that is, because again, many of the immigrants I know from many different groups spend a lot of their time listening to the radio or to TV, using satellite or other ways to be able to hear things from their country, because they miss their country, and that's perfectly understandable, and it's good to do that. But you need to balance it with something where you're getting a chance to hear about Canada and practice your English. And I have a friend who was applying. She was a journalist in her country, and she was applying for a radio position here, and there was one available, and she would have had a good chance of getting it, except because she didn't listen to any English radio or TV or any movies in English either. The first question that the interviewer asked her was, can you tell me about a recent event in Edmonton that you are familiar with? And she couldn't think of a single one. And then the announcer said, not the announcer, the interviewer said, what can you tell me about the political views of Canadians across the country? And she couldn't answer the question, so she didn't get the job. So although she was applying for an arts journalism, and she thought it wasn't going to be anything that she would need to know about generally, it was. So, and he was looking to see if she would be a good cultural fit for the radio station, which hired many people from different cultures. So it wasn't that they weren't diverse, it's just that they wanted to make sure that she actually understood the Canadian landscape in which she lived. So these are some really important recommendations. Another thing is, if you spend all your time with people from your own culture, although it feels comfortable and gives you a break from the stress of living in a new place, it doesn't help you to develop cultural fluency. And that means being able to move back and forth from one culture to the next without it being a shock to the system, to you, and also for employers. So it means a lot of employers are very sensitive to that in Canada. They're looking to see how close or how much you have worked at approaching yourself towards the culture. So if you spend some time in groups and with people who are not from your culture, and you balance that, that's going to be very helpful for finding work. And one thing that both Ada and I do, and almost everybody that I know who's been successful in mastering a second language, is we all read in that language for a few minutes each day. So not necessarily work related, just whatever we're interested in. Read a few minutes each day in that language, even 2 or 3 sentences if you're very tired. And it will help you, because your language will always improve. What you can absorb from reading and understand is always going to be greater than what you can speak. So if you keep adding new things into the reading, that means your speaking will also start to catch up.
At the same time, I have some recommendations as an international student back in the days, immigrants. I have some recommendations for those of you who are still in school. Get as much work experience as possible. Yes, academic achievement GPAs are very important, but at the same time, if you want to settle in Canada, it's a long-term game. In order to get used to speaking the language and adapt to the Canadian culture and learn how to perform in the interview situations, get some work experience. Whether it's part-time, full-time, co-op, intern, practicum, preferred, of course, is your job-related or major-related, your study-related jobs. But if not, I always recommend to have some customer service and sales experience. It's very critical to help you build that interpersonal communication skills as well as that confidence. And these are the skills that every employer will seek, because nobody's these days going to work in silos anymore. We all need to work in teams. We all need to talk to others. So if you don't know how to approach other people, then the job will not last very long. If you have progressed from a, let's say, frontline customer service representative, and in 6 months to a year, eventually got promoted to a frontline supervisor position, hey, that's great to show on your resume. That shows stability as well as progression in your positions. Volunteer experience is also critical. Again, so if you can get some school-related experience, volunteer experience that's similar to what you study, that's great. If not, then just do any volunteer work that will build your skills that you need in order to work in Canada, as well as expand your network.
Sounds good.
And so although I said that GPAs and school activities are not as critical as getting job experiences, while you're in school, you still want to do a good job with your subject studies. But on top of that, if you have opportunities to participate in case competitions, field trips, conferences, even present at seminars and industrial events, why not do so? That also shows that you went above and beyond while you're at school, and you have more skills than other competitors do. Also be a student leader. Why not run for let's say the VP external for your student association? Try out how to connect with sponsors and build a few different skills. Being a student leader is also great information to showcase on your resume. And have some hobbies. I love sports, so I always encourage people to play sports and to join sports teams, because with that sports team, you learn, again, the Canadian culture, practice English, keep yourself fit, have a work-life balance, but on top of that is expanding your networks.
Especially a team sport, because in the team sport, you get to know your other team members. Mm-hmm. Yes, I have a friend who was, she's actually immigrated 3 times to 3 different countries, and English is her 4th language. And one of the ways that she was able to improve her English was when she was in school studying to be an accountant, she participated in a competition, a case study competition, which she said she thought was so hard she couldn't believe it, but that forced her to make a public presentation. And from then on, she started to be much more confident with her English. So that competition idea is a really good one, Ada. Employers want to know why they should hire you. Let's say that you're an employer and 100 people have applied for the job. All those job resumes start to look the same. Everybody says that they're the best and you should hire them. And all of their recommendations from other people say that they're excellent employees. So how are you supposed to know who you should hire? The way to do that is to find out about people's interests, hobbies, and talents. They want to know about your personality. And one way they can do that is to see what activities you participated in. They look for communication, initiative, and willingness to learn from those activities. So don't underestimate the value of putting them in there. Now, sometimes, I just recently read an article about this, sometimes people's activities can prejudice them, that an employer can be prejudiced against them. So let's say, for example, that all of your volunteer experiences had to do with soccer, and your employer isn't interested in soccer. Well, maybe that the employer will say, this is a soccer fanatic, I'm not interested. But I think that the chances that the employer will be prejudiced against you because of your activities are pretty small in comparison with what you gain by putting them out there. In fact, at least 50% of the jobs that I got because of my outside activities, not my qualifications for the job, which surprised me every single time. So it's something to keep in mind. Also, you want to, for employers, you want to consider different ways to ask the same question, because people from other countries don't necessarily have presentation skills. They haven't learned how to do that in school. Like here, people start presenting from the time they're in kindergarten. Even in nursery school, they are making presentations. And then they work in groups, and each group member is marked on their presentation skills. This kind of thing is not necessarily what people learn to do in other countries. So as an employer, you need to be considerate of that and think, well, we have to ask questions in a few different ways to see if we can get to the answers, because in addition to the fact that people don't necessarily feel comfortable with the language and the culture, they may also not be comfortable with presenting themselves in public. So consider that they're not showing their true nature and that there's a whole lot of good stuff under the surface that you may not be seeing. So if you wouldn't mind typing into the chat box right now, have you we just told you about how important it is to have hobbies, interests, and volunteer so that you can put that onto your resume. So what kinds of things can you do to show your personality to a potential employer? Just type that in there and we will come back to it as we see the questions pop up. Here's one already. This one is a person who does rock climbing and also does coaching for people who are new to the countries in accent reduction. Okay, I'm going to have to get in touch with her. That's Kathleen. Kathleen, thank you. That could be something that other people are looking for. So type in your contact information and then we will put that in later. And Kathleen is not a plant. We did not know she was going to be on this webinar. Kathleen, and I also don't know that she's a rock climber, but that's interesting. And that could be useful for an employer. So, and a couple of other people, someone else said reading, somebody else said traveling, somebody else said learning other languages. So those are all good things to put on your resume.
And I also suggest for newcomers, international students, immigrants, whatever the situation that you're in, always have time to sit down and write down your own goals. So that worked for me. When I was about to graduate from my undergraduate degree, I set a short-term goal of finding a job within the year. And then the medium term is to really get comfortable with the company I used to work at, get to know the people, improve my language, and improve on my technical knowledge. The long term, I wanted to become a respected human resources professional. And I have worked really hard on achieving these goals. So my suggestion is that when you're doing goal setting, make sure that your goals are tied with building that network at work and improving on your knowledge continuously. I once read a book saying that we lose about 20% of the knowledge that we learn from university or school every year. With that being said, in 5 years, we'll be back to square one. If we do not continue to learn new things and develop our knowledge, we'll be excluded from the society because of competition. And also on top of doing continuous improving of yourself, establishing network, and improving your technical knowledge is to establish your professional credibility. And that is the way how we go in this society to improve ourselves and get better with our career. But the question back to you is, how well do we really know ourselves? That's probably a $1 million question. If we don't know ourselves really well, our strengths and weaknesses, our goals, how can we really say what our goal setting is going to be like? So today I want to share with you a tip sheet or cheat sheet that I developed called Do You Know Your SWOT Analysis? This is something that worked really well when I was back in the days, and I continue to keep going back to the sheet and reflect on my own strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. You probably have seen this for organizations using SWOT analysis, but SWOT analysis also works for persons, individuals. So strengths and weaknesses are internal to yourself. So what am I good at? What knowledge, experience, skills, abilities that I possess are better than my competitors? What are my weaknesses? What am I trying to avoid on a day-to-day basis? What am I afraid of? What do I really need to improve or change my bad habits to achieve my goal? Opportunities and threats are external to yourself. Opportunities could be things like what are trends and patterns in industry? What are new regulations or policy situations that would affect my occupation? What new knowledge or technology do I need to learn? And threats are external as well, so that could be things like how serious is the competition for the occupation that I'm going to apply for? And what do I need to do constantly to be better than the competitions, than the competitors?
And that is a tip sheet that Ada created for you. That is a download from the webinar. So if you don't get it, then email me, marie@shiftworkplace.com, and I will send you the tip sheet. And it's quite useful because it gives you a chart that you can use to, and with some prompts in it as well, so you can find out how to know yourself better and to be more specific in your job search. That's very important for seeking work here in Canada. So same tips in the same vein as what Ada started. For short, medium, and long-term goals in networking, it's really important to keep your professional network alive. And I have a colleague who was, very stable in his job for almost 20 years. And he was senior, in fact, vice president of the company where he worked, and he was recently dismissed because of the economy. They, in fact, closed the entire branch where he was working, and he didn't have anybody in his professional network because he hadn't done a single thing to keep his network alive. And so this is not something you want to happen to you. So the way to avoid that is a short-term goal, talk to one or two colleagues outside of your culture so that you're making a variety of connections in different cultures. And that can be very helpful when you need work because everybody's got their own network. So if your network is broad, then you can go and talk to them afterwards for work opportunities. For a medium-term goal, attend company events and volunteer at those events. That's a really great way to get to know people. And people often choose the volunteers for things. So I belong to a business association that I was working for on a voluntary basis for a couple of years, and I ended up getting several contracts that I never even looked for, just because the people on the board noticed things that I did and how I said things, and so they offered me these contracts or sent me to somebody who had a contract. So the same kind of thing can happen for jobs. Also, make sure long-term that you join professional groups and that you go to meetups and conferences occasionally so that you are known in the field, people see you as being there and being a part of the community and contributing to the community. This is all really necessary to creating a network that you can fall back on, because the network will outlive you and outlive the companies that you might be working for or the organizations you might be working for. So a network is one of those eternal things that you want to be a part of and you want to keep developing.
And again, I'll put on my human resources hat on. Finally, we have a few tips for employers to integrate newcomers into their workplace. Of course, it's about coaching. Coaching could be if you have a manager working with several newcomers, make sure that the manager provides regular feedback, asking challenging questions so the newcomers can improve on their skills, and also lead by the examples. In terms of mentorship system, it could be that organization sets up, pairs up people, the more newer newcomers coming to the workplace with more senior people. It does not have to be in the same department. It can be with any places in the organization. It's usually a casual relationship that the senior employees can hear from the junior employees and provide safe and sound suggestions. And the junior employees also feel safe that they have somebody to ask questions and bounce ideas off. Companies can also identify career path horizontally or vertically. So that means that employees know very well, okay, so if I want to do accounting, where and how I can grow my career within your organization. In that situation, if I satisfy my career path growth, I do not have to leave. I'm happy here. Why would I have to turn around and go to a different employer? So it's a win-win situation for both an employee and an employer. And then finally, last but not least, is professional development programs. That means employers can support either financially or time-wise, giving employees the opportunities to attend professional-related training, having in-house trainers do training with employees, or even reimburse the employees who are willing to take additional trainings outside of business hours.
Great suggestions.
And then as an immigrant, as I mentioned, although I've been in Canada for 14 years, it sounds like a long time. The time went by really fast. I am still learning the language every day, and I'm still learning nuances of the culture. I'm not going to scare you, but it's going to be a lifelong journey. And really establishing yourself in Canada is, you can set short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals. But at the end of the day, to successfully establish yourself in Canada and grow your career is a long-term journey. So start taking down the list of what you want to achieve in the next couple of years and start taking actions from today.
So in review mode right now, I expect that you should have a few more insights into how Chinese job seekers see employers and how the Canadian employers see Chinese job seekers, because we did show you those contrasting things throughout the presentation. We also gave you some good strategies for negotiating your career. I think that Ada's idea of doing a personal SWOT analysis is really good, because it allows you to be able to also seize opportunities that come up, because you are already quite clear on where potential strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats lie, and you can relate your own specific transferable skills to whatever those new opportunities could be, or to mitigate the threats that come up. So, and then also we gave you some ideas for building your career over the long term. So having short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals is very, very important. So maybe you could type into the chat box what you find most useful from this presentation, what you'd like to know more about, because we always try to tailor these webinars to be extremely practical for people who are watching them. We want to make sure you're getting lots of value out of them and that this is something that you enjoy, because of course we'd like you to come back to attend more of our webinars and that you'll tell your friends. So please share this webinar, the recording. You can share the recording link and let other people know about it if you think it would be helpful to them. And lastly, both Ada and I have consulting businesses where we have things that we're working on, and every once in a while we need to reach out and ask people for some help. So I'm asking you for some help today for a new YouTube channel that we just started. It's called the Canadian Workplace YouTube channel. Right now it has English YouTubes, many different ones from 30 seconds to 3 minutes long, to help people find work in their fields, and keep it, of course, and get promoted, of course. But in just a couple of weeks, all sorts of other language subtitles are going to go up. So this can be really useful if you speak Arabic, if you speak French, if you speak Spanish, Hindi, or Ukrainian, because those are the first 5 languages that are going to be going up. And so take a look at the channel, because it's really useful right now, even as it is without the subtitles. And in a couple of weeks, it will be having more subtitles. And we need to reach 100 subscribers to the YouTube channel so that we can get our own name instead of a string of Google numbers, which is our goal, is to get our own YouTube channel name. So help us reach that goal.
And then from my side, with my consulting business, we have recently developed a WeChat public platform. So WeChat is a mobile app. So if you have on your tablet or on your phone, please download the WeChat app, and you can subscribe to us and follow our updates.
Great. So 2 easy action items for you to do. And then, of course, the other action item is to use the SWOT analysis that you got, and also to look at the PDF version of this webinar, which we are also including in the handouts, so that you can get some tips and decide what you would like to start working on. Choose one thing that you can start working on to keep your career fresh, and keep doing that, because career development is a lifelong journey. So here are our contact information lists. There's Ada's right up there and mine, and you can see where we are and how to contact us. And we really hope that you will, because we love to hear from you. Thank you all very much for participating in this webinar, for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing your feedback.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.